India is surrounded by a hostile and difficult neighbourhood. China has thousands of troops on its border with India, Myanmar is in the middle of a civil war, Pakistan is sponsoring terror attacks in Kashmir, a pro-China government sits in the Maldives, and Bangladesh recently toppled Sheikh Hasina's pro-India government. And now, Sri Lanka is headed for a presidential election on September 21st that could bring a pro-China leader to power. That man is Anura Dissanayake, who is leading in the polls to be Sri Lanka's next president. For decades, his JVP party has been an extremist organization that has criticized India and has even fought Indian troops on the battlefield. If Dissanayake wins this election, India's sensitive neighbourhood could get a whole lot more unpredictable. On this episode of Threadbare, we're going to take a look at the all-important Sri Lankan elections. We break down why the elections matter, the rise of Anura Dissanayake, and why India is so interested in these elections to begin with. So let's do a quick recap. For the last few years, Sri Lanka has seen political and economic chaos. In 2022, the country was nearly bankrupt after years of corruption and economic mismanagement by President Gotabaya Rajapaksa, a member of the politically prominent Rajapaksa family. Food and fuel prices increased sharply, and ordinary Sri Lankans were hit by the worst economic crisis in a century. This led to public anger against the government, and in 2022, massive protests broke out that toppled the government of President Gotabaya Rajapaksa. Since then, the country has been on a slow path to recovery. Numerous countries, but especially India, have provided billions of dollars to bail out Sri Lanka's broken economy. The new government, headed by President Ranil Wickremesinghe, has also been making painful but necessary reforms. These reforms have had some positive impact. Inflation is down, growth has finally returned, and the country is a lot more stable. And India has been an active participant in that recovery. In 2022, it gave Sri Lanka a $4 billion bailout package, and also helped it secure funding from the International Monetary Fund. It's also unveiled a number of really big projects to improve economic cooperation with Sri Lanka. This includes a petroleum pipeline, a land bridge connecting India and Sri Lanka, new solar and wind projects, port development, and massive infrastructure deals. In a very troubled neighborhood, Sri Lanka has turned into a very calm and dependable relationship for India. But all of that progress is now uncertain. Sri Lanka is headed for a presidential election that could change all of this. There are 4 major contenders for the presidency in Sri Lanka, and the current favourite to win is a man called Anura Dissanayake, who heads a party called the JVP. Indians may not have heard of Dissanayake, but you can be sure that Dissanayake and his JVP have taken an interest in India. The party was founded as a revolutionary Marxist force that was determined to use violence to overthrow Sri Lanka's government. The party has launched 2 military insurgencies in the 1970s and 1980s against Sri Lanka's government that killed thousands of people. India was a big target of the JVP, which distrusted New Delhi's power and influence in Sri Lanka. The JVP has fought and killed Indian soldiers on the battlefield, especially when India militarily intervened in Sri Lanka from 1987 to 1990. So India's relationship with the JVP has never been easy. But lately, the party has tried to moderate and modernize. The JVP has given up violence and is part of the political mainstream, and its leader, Anura Dissanayake, has won a lot of support from young voters because of his clean and anti-corruption image. Dissanayake also visited India early this year to meet with Foreign Minister S. Jaishankar and publicly acknowledged that Sri Lanka would need Indian and international support to transform itself. But there are also serious questions about how Dissanayake and the JVP would approach India. Dissanayake has made clear that his visit to India would not lead to any fundamental changes in the party's economic or political strategy, which could mean continued suspicion of India and its influence in Sri Lanka. So, infrastructure projects like the modernization of the Trincomalee oil farms or the land bridge between India and Sri Lanka could face trouble if Dissanayake wins power. His party has also publicly questioned the process by which Indian companies like Adani won wind power contracts in Sri Lanka, and he could cancel those projects if he is elected president. Given past history, India might be concerned that its companies will face more scrutiny and get less access to important economic deals. Experts also argue that the JVP's Marxist past would actually bring it closer to a country like China. And it's true that right before Dissanayake visited India, he also led a delegation visit to China. Aside from economics, China is the big factor that India is worried about. For the last 20 years, India and Sri Lanka have been locked in a competition for influence in Sri Lanka. China has poured billions of dollars in investments into the country, and its relationship with Colombo peaked during the rule of President Mahinda Rajapaksa. China's acquisition of Hambantota port led to concerns in India that Beijing was using its financial power to capture Sri Lanka's economy and its foreign policy. This Chinese influence remains a major concern for India. For example, India has repeatedly told governments in Sri Lanka that it does not want Chinese research vessels, which India sees as spy ships, in the Indian Ocean. India believes that these ships are capturing maritime data that could be used by the Chinese military some point in the future. Sri Lanka's government has often allowed these ships to dock in its ports. It was only recently that Wickremesinghe's government announced a ban on any foreign research vessels in Sri Lanka. But that ban will soon run out, and it's not clear whether the Dissanayake government will continue to respect India's security concerns when it comes to China. But Dissanayake's victory is far from certain. There's also incumbent President Ranil Wickremesinghe, who is fighting to keep power. Wickremesinghe has claimed credit for stabilizing the country's economy after the chaos of the last few years. While he was initially trailing in the public polls, his support among all sections of the general public have surged in the last few weeks, while Dissanayake has actually lost a lot of support. Now, a Wickremesinghe victory might actually be a fairly welcome development for India. He is a predictable establishment politician who has been in politics for almost the last 50 years. India knows him well, and he knows India well. And over the last few years as president, Wickremesinghe has been happy to work more closely with India. He's also been more sensitive to India's security concerns on China. For example, in 2023, the Ceylon Electricity Board reportedly cut China out of several hybrid power projects in favor of Indian companies after India raised concerns about Chinese involvement. As a result, China hasn't really been all that active in Sri Lanka over the last few years. But Wickremesinghe's reputation as an establishment politician could also hurt him, since what Sri Lankans are really looking for is change. Sri Lankans believe that the country's big political families and ruling classes have run the country into the ground. And Wickremesinghe is absolutely part of that ruling elite. So if change is what voters want, Wickremesinghe may not be the right pick. There are two other politicians in the fray, Sajith Premadasa and Namal Rajapaksa. Both are scions of Sri Lanka's most prominent political families. But Namal Rajapaksa, the son of former President Mahinda Rajapaksa, doesn't really have a good shot at victory. After all, it was his family that led Sri Lanka to economic disaster just a few years ago. So that leaves us with Sajith Premadasa, whose father was also president. Premadasa is widely considered, along with Dissanayake, to be the top two frontrunners to become president. Premadasa has promised to fight corruption, create new social welfare programs, and also fix Sri Lanka's economy. From India's view, Premadasa could be a stable partner. He has already promised to maintain a close relationship with India if he's elected president, and also previously praised India for its economic support during Sri Lanka's economic crisis. Premadasa also spent decades in the UNP, a political party that has ruled Sri Lanka for decades and has long been considered to be pro-India. In the past, members of his political party have also been critical of projects funded by China. While Premadasa has not openly taken on China, his political background and his past record seems to suggest that he will respect India's interests. For India, this Sri Lankan election is deeply important. After serious setbacks in its neighbourhood with China, Pakistan, Myanmar, the Maldives and Bangladesh, India will want a stable partner it can count on. Will India's troubles in the neighbourhood continue, or will it finally get some relief? The Sri Lankan elections will reveal all. Thank you so much for watching Threadbare with me, Shashank Matu. You can catch me again next week on India Today Global.